hope you like this. If you do, give it a thumbs up and leave any comments below. And remember to subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date on all my hypnotic bedtime stories. So I hope you enjoy the story.
So as you listen to me and begin to drift comfortably asleep, I don't know whether you'll notice yourself drifting comfortably asleep faster with the sound of my voice, or the words that I use, or whether you'll drift comfortably asleep fastest with the spaces between my words. And so as you comfortably drift off asleep, listening to my voice in the background, I'm just going to tell a story about somebody who was on a long plane journey. And they regularly made these long plane journeys. They'd go to the airport. They would check in about 4 hours early. They'd get their luggage through. They'd go through all the check-in process so that they'd have time to chill out. They didn't like to feel rushed or hurried. They just liked to be able to chill out and relax until they knew that boarding was approaching. And they liked to have everything take its time and feel relaxed. And then on the plane, they would sit and they would listen to the various announcements. They'd pay attention to the various announcements. They'd gaze out the window as the plane travels along the runway. They'd gaze out the window as the plane leaves the runway. They'd be fascinated by that feeling between the plane being on the runway, getting faster and faster, and the vibrations and the sounds, and leaving the runway, and the silence from underneath the plane, and the sudden relaxation. And then they would sit back in their seat. They'd put headphones on. And they'd begin to drift comfortably asleep. And as they drift comfortably asleep, so they would imagine themselves walking down some steps. On step 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They'd imagine walking down the steps. And they'd have a sense of each step taking them deeper and more comfortably into a beautiful relaxed sleep. And as they walk down those steps, so their attention gets more focused internally on the experience they're having. And as their attention focuses on the experience, so they relax. And the more they focus inward, the less they focus externally. And as they relax and reach the bottom of the steps, they find themselves walking along the edge of a river. And they just walk gently, relaxing along the edge of the river on a riverbank, watching the way the water is flowing, watching little eddies in the water, watching dragonfly dancing above the water, noticing the way fish occasionally poke their mouths out the water, and the little splashes of fins in the water. And they walk along the riverbank, just gazing down diagonally into the water, noticing the bottom under the water, noticing the rocks, plants, and just finding their mind drifts and wanders and gets drawn into this ecosystem, to this life that happens beneath that water. And while that occurs, they notice each footstep they take, what it feels like to be walking on that riverbank. They notice the feeling of the breeze on their skin, and they notice how much they relax deeper with each step they take. And what they're doing as they walk along is they're trying to find a perfect place to stop and look and relax. A perfect place on the riverbank. And so as they walk along that bank, they find the ideal spot, and they stop, sit down. They can feel the grass under their hands. They relax back. They close their eyes, and they begin to listen to that sound of the running water, and listening to the sounds of birds in the sky, and aware of how these sounds help them drift off. And while they drift off deeper into their mind, they begin to imagine themselves somewhere else. They imagine themselves walking through an ancient city where everything appears to be made of sand, seems so smooth, and they run their hands along sand blocks, feeling the smoothness of that stone. They admire the work of the sand, and they walk through this ancient city, heading towards a temple. And they can hear the hustle and bustle of other people in the city, in this ancient city. They can see people walking in and out of that temple in the distance, as they walk towards the temple themselves. And they come here whenever they enter a plane and need to relax. They go to that riverbank, settle down on that riverbank, and come to this ancient city. And they walk through the ancient city to that temple. And as they arrive at the temple, they admire the size of it, the vastness of this temple. And they push open the door, walk into the temple and recognize how echoey each footstep is in here. They walk around the outside of the center of this temple, following a path around the outside, and then halfway round it cuts towards the center. And they follow that path all the way to the center. and they join a queue of people, and those people are queued up to have a sip out of a cup. And what they're sipping is water from a spring that comes up here in the middle of the temple. This water is healing water. And someone's dunking the water in the spring and then handing it to people who then have a sip before walking away. And so this person queues and waits patiently and expectantly as each person before them gets given that cup. They have a sip, they hand the cup back, then they walk away. And then the next person gets given the cup, they have a sip, they hand the cup back, and then they walk away. And then the next person gets given the cup, they have a sip, they hand the cup back, and then they walk away. And eventually it gets to this person's go, who has a sip, hands the cup back, and walks away. And he follows the others down some steps, away from that centre of the room. And he follows them through into another room. And in this room, there are mats on the floor. And people are coming in here, they're lying down on the mats, closing their eyes and drifting into a meditative state. And so this person follows them in, lies down on one of the spare mats, closes his eyes, and lets that healing water work by drifting inside his mind and seeing where he'll go. And as he drifts and floats inside his mind, he has a sense of himself navigating a boat down a canal. And it's a houseboat, and he has a sense that he lives on this. And there's beautiful countryside to the left and right of him. And he has a sense of navigating this boat down the canal. He's aware of what the sky looks like, what the clouds look like, birds, the sound of the water of the canal, the feeling of the air. And he navigates this houseboat down the canal. And he can hear the sound of the houseboat, hear the motor on the houseboat as he navigates it down the canal. And he reaches some locks, and he climbs off the boat, walks to the locks, opens the first locks, gets back on the boat, enters the lock, closes it behind him, and waits as the water rises and rises and rises. And after a while, the water stops rising. He gets off the boat again, fully opens the lock in front of him, gets back on the boat, passes through the lock and closes it behind him. And then slightly opens the other lock to drain that water out again. and then gets back to his boat and continues his journey. And he finds somewhere to moor the boat up. Somewhere he's going to call home. And he calls this place home. And he has some beautiful countryside around him. He has a bank that he can go and sit out on. And he enjoys this environment, finds it relaxing and peaceful. And then while he falls asleep in this houseboat, he begins to wake up in a forest. And as he wakes up in a forest, he notices the different sounds in the forest. Waking up in an evening in a forest. And he walks through the forest, pushing his way through dense forest, before reaching a lake. And at this lake, he sees a boat. And he climbs into the boat, and he rows out into the lake. And then he pulls the oars into the boat, and just sits back in that boat to float. And he can feel the boat rocking ever so gently in the waves. He can hear the way the water's just lapping against the edge of the boat. He can see stars in the sky. He can hear the jungle sounds. And he knows he's learning something. And on the boat he finds a book. And he picks up the book and he starts paging through that book. And he notices that each page is just started with an open-ended sentence. And so he reads one page and then another page, and he doesn't know what the open-ending sentences mean and why that's all that's in the book. And he turns the pages one at a time. And as he reaches the end of the book, so he sees a mirror on the inside of the back cover. And notices himself in that mirror, and knows the pages were to teach him something, and the mirror was to teach him something. And he closes the book, puts it back under a chair, closes his eyes resting in that boat, to ponder the meaning of the book. And after some time pondering the meaning of the book, he starts to get a feeling of what the meaning of the book is. He starts to row his way back to shore. And pushes on through the jungle before finding somewhere to settle down, close his eyes and drift off to sleep. And just as he's drifting off asleep, he awakens near the houseboat. He turns the houseboat around and starts to make his journey back along the canal. And he journeys back along the canal. And he reaches the lock. He makes sure the far side of the lock is shut. He opens the near side slightly. That allows some of that water to run into the lock. He watches as that water level rises until it's the same level as the water where he is. He then fully opens the lock, gets back in the boat and drives into the lock, closes it behind him, then opens the lock in front of him just ever so slightly. As that water level lowers, and he pays attention and watches as the water gradually lowers. And he finds it such a fascinating thing. Something so simple allows boats to go up and down, allows water to be higher and lower. And then once the water's drained, and the water level inside the lock is the same as the level outside the lock where he's heading, he opens it up, goes back to his boat, drives his boat through the lock to the rest of the canal, gets out the boat and closes it behind him. And then goes back to his boat and continues his journey. And while he's continuing his journey, enjoying the countryside, enjoying the slow pace of life, he finds a place to rest and moor up. And he drifts off asleep and finds himself waking up in that sleep temple where he knows that healing water has helped him and has taught him something and has done what it does. He finds his way back out of that temple. He wanders round and explores for a while, around the ancient city. And then he finds somewhere just outside the city, where he stops, sits down, closes his eyes, and drifts comfortably off asleep. And as he does, he finds himself awakening on the bank of that lake, on the edge of the river. Knowing that now, when he's ready, he's able to drift back to wakefulness on that plain. And he knows that he sleeps on the plain for the whole time the journey takes, and that his unconscious mind is responsive and notices when the plane is approaching landing, and that gives him an unconscious signal to awaken on the plane. But before that, he just stays in these different sleeps, exploring lakes and rivers, exploring different places, ancient times. Each time he drifts off asleep, he awakens somewhere else. And in that other place, when he drifts off to sleep, he awakens back where he came from. If he's heading in that direction, and he can head in one direction or another, he can head deeper and further into more and more sleeps, or he can head back through the sleeps, closer to wakeful awareness. And he can do that as he chooses, until such time that he decides to wake up. But for now he decides to make the most of drifting, floating and relaxing, asleep for a little longer.